My friend she gets kicked out of the programs. Like, you know what? I would literally be happier living in my car and being homeless than I would in this program. I haven't even talked about the murder yet. Okay. I figured I better start uploading videos to this channel just to get the ball rolling. I don't really have like editing software. I can edit a little bit on my phone. I don't have a laptop, and I don't have enough money to be like buying things right now. So I'm just gonna talk into the camera. Probably just gonna be like some simple cuts. And I apologize for like the audio quality. This is just recorded on my phone. So yeah, the videos will get better over time. Right now, this is what we got. So I want to tell a story about my time in a transitional housing program and why I chose to be homeless rather than stay in a housing program. So before I entered this program, I was living in my car as I am now, but my car wasn't running. The starter was broken, and my dad had recently retired, so I wasn't getting any money from him. All I had was my government food stamps, and that's literally it. My car was parked in a parking lot, and I had to walk in all weather conditions to get to places to charge my phone and use the bathroom and, pretty much. And I was very hopeless. This was my second time being homeless, and it was the worst one because I didn't have any money and my car wasn't moving. My car was about to get towed out of this parking lot, and literally the day before it was towed, I got accepted into this transitional housing program. And I was pretty excited. I was told that this was a program that I could stay in for at least a year, and then I would get extensions if I didn't have a place to stay at the end of my year. And they would provide housing, they would provide mental health care, including group therapy and individual therapy. They provided case management, psychiatry, medication, and drug and alcohol rehab and support if I needed it. I was really excited about this. I was like, hell yeah. I mean, this is like a miracle, right? I've been going through the worst stretch of homelessness of my life. I have no money. I have no prospects. I have very little support of any kind. I was like, this sounds amazing. This sounds great. I'm going to really enjoy this. I got to this program and I was like, okay, just give me like a week to get settled in, just sort of chill and relax. Because I was just homeless and penniless for a year. I was just, starving and picking up cigarettes off the ground and stuff like that. Just give me some time to sort of chill out and de-stress from that experience. So I was chilling for about like a week. And when I started going to the group therapies, I very quickly made a friend when I started going to the group therapies. In between the groups, we would go outside and smoke cigarettes. A lot of the members would go outside and smoke cigarettes. And I was out there smoking, and this girl comes up and starts asking me questions, and we connected right away, and we just start hanging out. And one day, very early on, I think it was like my second week in the program, I'm hanging out with this girl in her apartment. All the apartments are identical, but I was in her apartment. And she got a call from one of the program staff, and I didn't really figure out what was going on, but apparently she had gotten into some kind of argument when she went to the groups that day, and she like left early, and they were calling her to make sure that she didn't need to go to the hospital because she had said some like inflammatory things or some concerning things or something like that in the heat of the moment while she was arguing with somebody. And she was kind of pissed off about it. She was like, I don't really want to talk about this, but if you want me to go to the hospital, then I'll go to the hospital. I'll go to the ER and do a mental health checkup, and they'll just send me home. They'll decide that I don't need to go to the hospital. But if you're so concerned about it, then I'll go to the hospital and get a checkup. And so what happens is you go to the ER and you ask for a mental health checkup, and they, send you to a room, and they get a psychiatrist or someone to come and give you a checkup. And if they find that you have intentions of self-harm or harming other people, then they will essentially just send you to a psychiatric hospital, a behavioral facility. And I'd been through this process before. I've been hospitalized multiple times before going to this program. And I kind of knew what it was like, right? She's saying, I'm going to the hospital. Can you please come with me so I don't have to go alone? Like, who's going to say no to that, right? I was like, absolutely. I'm trying to make a friend. I'm trying to be nice. I'm just a good person. I wouldn't feel right saying no to that kind of request. So I said yes. And she took me with her to the hospital. And we were there for a couple hours. And then I got a text from my new case manager with the program, who I hadn't really met yet. And she asked me if I could call the director of the program, who I also hadn't really met. I met her once. We said hi, introduced each other, whatever. This was my first real conversation with the director of the program over the phone. So I went outside and I called the director. And entering the phone call, I don't really think there's any kind of issue. I think she's probably just calling to sort of check on us and get some information about what's going on so that she knows what's going on. But what happens is she starts going off about how I'm breaking the rules and I need to focus on my mental health and not get dragged into other people's drama, and, you know, how I'm going to miss curfew and how I'm going to be out past curfew and all this. And it was like 3 hours before the curfew, which, by the way, was unenforceable because they didn't have any employees like on staff at night during the curfew hour, which was 10 p.m. They didn't have any staff. So it was literally like a curfew that they could not enforce because they couldn't pay anybody to enforce it. But she was all worried that I was going to miss the curfew in like 2 or 3 hours, and that I was getting pulled into somebody's drama, essentially. From my perspective, I was providing peer support, right? I've made a friend and I'm trying to continue making friends. And again, I just wouldn't feel right saying no to a request like that, rules or no rules. And when she mentioned that I'm breaking the rules, I asked, where in the rule book, the handbook that you gave me and that I read, where does it say that I can't go to the hospital with somebody or hang out with other members outside of the program? Like, where does it say that? Because that is not written in the rules. And apparently, as I learned in that conversation, there are some unwritten rules. And she was sort of, floundering a little bit. She was like, oh, well, we're trying to revise the rules. We're going through a kind of a transitional period with the rules. We're trying to make them a little different. The handbook that you got isn't totally accurate. And I was like, okay, so why did nobody tell me that? Like, could you at least, print out the new rules or something? Like, how can I be expected to follow a rule that I don't know is a rule? Right? I feel like I'm doing the natural human thing to do here, but apparently I'm breaking a rule. So what I quickly learned, this program, everything that I do in this program is going to be pathologized and is going to be examined through a lens of mental illness, essentially. So me trying to provide peer support to my friend is read as getting dragged into my friend's drama. I didn't even know what was going on. I mean, she had the phone call, she had it on speaker so I could hear her talking to the guy. I could hear the guy talking, and he was saying, are you okay? Do you need to go to the hospital? Do we need to send somebody to check on you, et cetera, et cetera. It just seemed like she, had a bad day and got kind of angry, and, I don't really know what happened. I'm not trying to get dragged into drama. I'm just hanging out with somebody that I'm newly friends with, and she's asking for some company while she goes to the hospital. And I can't say necessarily pathologized for the idea of getting dragged into drama, but that was the director's perception, is that I'm not focusing on my mental health and my healing journey because somehow I'm getting wrapped up in this other person's drama. The director of the program, I mean, she was straight up like a dictator. And she was not good at her job. And we'll talk about that later, too. They actually ran an investigation on her because she was so bad at her job. We'll talk about that later. But she was a dictator. She essentially treated the members as if they were entitled children. They're people that are in this program because they're having a difficult time in life, one way or another. They don't have housing. They need intensive mental health care and, a place to sort of get support from all angles. But for some reason, the director felt that all of the members were entitled children. She really did act that way. And I discussed this with at least one of the other staff members of how she gives me like, what I said is she gives me abusive mom vibes. And the staff member was like, yeah, I kind of see what you mean. I kind of see what you're talking about there. So she was like an abusive mom that treated all the members as if they were entitled children, when it was literally her job to manage providing them support from all sides. Of course, they're acting entitled because that's why they're here, is to get help, right? They are entitled to the help because their insurance companies or their families are paying for them to be here to get help from your employees. And so she was very unapproachable. It was very difficult to get any kind of yes out of her, even if you had like a good suggestion. It was like pulling teeth, and it would be like all of the staff members and multiple of the members would have to come to her and repeatedly beg for something that they wanted, that they all collectively wanted to happen, in order for it to happen, because the director was like, it's my way or the highway. And I mean, there are problems with the fact that a lot of these members were on insurance, right? They were getting their stay at this program paid for by insurance. And it was very expensive, very, very expensive for the insurance company to pay for this kind of intensive care. And even more of an insult to both the insurance companies that are paying for this care and the members themselves that are receiving the care, that the care is actually not effective. The service that this program was providing was simply not effective, and it did not accomplish its promises to its members, except for one time. The whole time that I was there, only one of the members that was discharged from the program was discharged into a better situation than when they came in. Everybody else that was discharged was either discharged into homelessness or back into whatever shitty like home situation that they were in with their family. The director of the program is so bad at her job that the service isn't working anymore. So they're just wasting their money. And this is state insurance, by the way, like Medicaid or something like that. And of course, they quickly realized that their money was kind of going to waste, because they had an employee from the insurance company would come in every month and do a meeting with the members, the staff, and one member individually, and sort of check up on their progress. Say like, do you find the program effective? Do you find that it's actually helping you? And if people say no, the insurance company is like, okay, well, we're not going to pay for you to stay here anymore if it's not effective. It doesn't matter if it's your fault or if it's the program's fault. We don't have anything to do with that. If any singular area of the program isn't helpful, even if the other areas are, it's considered non-compliance, right? It's considered non-compliance if it's not helping, essentially. And so, I mean, from the insurance company's perspective, it is the members' fault if they don't get help from the program, but ultimately they don't really care if it's the program's fault or if it's the members' fault for not complying with the program. They don't really care. If it's not effective, they're not going to pay for it, essentially. If they're not seeing the results that they want to see, they're not going to pay for your stay there anymore. So, I mean, that's a really big issue in and of itself, because it forces the members to comply with things that maybe are wasting their time or maybe even are detrimental. This program sounds great because it's like a whole thing, right? It's a whole package, essentially. It's intensive care. And that can be really helpful, but it simply wasn't. It simply wasn't. So, for example, during my time there, I joined this program specifically for the housing because I was homeless and I was depressed and hopeless, sure, but that was because of my situation, because I was homeless and didn't have any money, and I was in a very, very bad like quality of life. And so I knew that if I just had like housing, like no strings attached, I just have a place to live where I can take a shower and you know, get my car back up and running and do whatever I need to do, then I knew that I would be okay with just that. Like all I really needed was the housing. I have an extensive history of mental health care. I've been in the mental health care system since I was like 14 years old. It's been, you know, over a decade of going to various therapists, various psychiatrists, various hospitals, various programs all over the country. And, you know, when they told me this is housing, group therapy, medication, and drug and alcohol, I was like, great, I really only need the housing. I don't have a problem with drugs. I mean, I smoke cigarettes, and I like to smoke weed when I can. But other than that, like, I'd overcome alcoholism all on my own, and I don't drink much anymore. I drink at a sustainable level now, which is actually very rarely. I had quit smoking weed because I couldn't afford it. Obviously, I didn't have any money, and that wasn't really a major problem. Like, the point is, I don't have a drug problem, and I've been doing therapy and group therapy and psychiatry and been medicated on various things. I've been doing all of that other stuff for so long that I didn't really want to deal with that, right? They were telling me, you need to come to the group therapies every single day, including on the weekends, 7 days a week. Maybe they had Sundays off. I don't know, because I never went on the weekends because I have too much self-respect for that. I was like, I'm not going to do this shit. You're not paying me to come to these group therapies. It's a waste of my time. I know it. I went to the group therapies often. I think I went to like most of them in the beginning, and then it kind of dropped off as I realized that it was a waste of my time. But I went to the group therapies, and both the other members of the program and the staff that were running the therapies, and my therapist that was doing individual therapy with me, everybody was saying, like, you don't need therapy. Like, you actually have such an extensive mental health care history, that you kind of know what you're doing when it comes to your mental health. Like, you know all the coping mechanisms, and you know all of the, cognitive distortions. You know what CBT is, you know what DBT is. Like, you come to these group therapies and you just look, I mean, I participated, and I was also thinking, I'll continue going just in case there's anything I could gain from it, right? A little refresher every once in a while is not a bad thing. But I knew I wasn't getting anything out of this, and the staff and the other members also knew that I wasn't getting anything out of this. The insurance company also knew that I wasn't getting anything out of it, and because of that, they wanted to stop paying for me to be there. Pretty much the whole time I was there, as I stopped going to group therapies, as I realized that it was a waste of time, every time I would meet with this representative of the insurance company every month, it would be like, you need to go to group therapies. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's effective for you or not. The insurance company is just not going to pay for you to stay here and keep getting care and, stay in your housing. All I needed was the housing, and there was no other way for me to get housing at the time. I mean, I was also applying for things like Section 8 and like housing programs like that. But the reason I was in that program is because I didn't want to live in my car anymore. And actually, living in my car wasn't really a big issue. It's the fact that my car was immobile and about to be towed. So if I could get my car running again, then living in my car really isn't, the worst thing that could happen. So, I mean, I'm like participating in the program somewhat. I was smoking a bit of weed with my friend. I was doing drug tests once a month, so it was easy for me to pass those drug tests by just not smoking for half the month. And then by the time the test rolled around, I was clean. And that wasn't super difficult for me. So, I mean, the drug and alcohol program, absolutely necessary for people that do seriously have an issue with drugs to an unhealthy degree. But I was not one of those people. So I was like, I'm just going to smoke weed and for half the month. And, I would have been honest about it if they wouldn't have made such a big deal about it. But they really treated me smoking weed as soon as they found out. They treated it like the director and one of the staff members cared a lot about it. Everybody else was kind of like, everybody else could tell that I didn't have a problem with drugs and with weed, and they didn't really care. What they cared about was me actually getting the housing and staying in the housing. And so the staff members were like urging me to continue complying with the program and going to the group therapies, even though they admitted, like, you don't really need this stuff and it is a waste of your time. But if you want the housing, unfortunately, with the way all of this works, you're going to have to quit smoking weed and you're going to have to go to the group therapies. I haven't even talked about the murder yet. I haven't even mentioned that. There was a murder shortly before I got there, about a month before I got there into the program. somebody was murdered. And I don't know all the details because I learned about this retroactively from a bunch of people. I just got bits and pieces of it. But apparently there is a man in the program that was suffering from some serious delusions, and he had a very traumatic life that affected his sense of morality. And it is very rare for people with schizophrenia or severe mental health conditions like that to actually become violent toward other people. It's very, very rare, but in this case it did happen because this guy, he was just mistreated his entire life, and he didn't have a sense of right and wrong. And so he felt threatened by his roommate in one way or another, and he talked apparently for weeks about how he was going to stab this guy. He was saying, I hate this guy, I don't like this guy, I want him dead. And he just kept talking about it. He kept saying, like, I am going to do this. And people took him seriously, except for the director. The other staff members and the other members took him seriously, and they heard him saying these things and were like, we need to separate him. He needs to be separated. He needs to go to the hospital and like actually be separated and get some more intensive care than what's being provided here. Because if he's in proximity with his roommate, he lives with this guy, and he keeps saying these things, he's gonna do it at some point. And guess what? He did. He did it. Murder was committed, and the apartment complex was very upset. So apparently for 15 years, this program had been leasing a number of apartments from this apartment complex, and it was all fine for the most part. I mean, you put a whole bunch of mentally ill people in close proximity together, and you're going to get an increased number of mental breakdowns and holes in the wall and self-harm and blood on the carpets and things like that. But apparently there had never been a murder before. And because of that, and also because of everything else that was going on, the director was investigated. For 15 years, this program had been running smoothly, and she was promoted to director from secretary, a position which she worked at for, I think, like 14 years, almost the whole time. She worked as a secretary. And then as soon as she got promoted to director, things started going downhill immediately. So because of that, the corporate entity that owned the program sent somebody to investigate the director. And we were all buzzing at the time. Everybody was so excited, thinking, oh my God, she's finally going to get fired. She's finally going to get reprimanded. Finally, something is going to happen. Everybody is thinking, the staff and the members are all thinking, this is great. Finally, we're going to get somebody else in the seat that actually knows what they're doing. But as it turns out, what the investigation found out is that, yes, she is really bad at her job. And yes, she is tanking the performance of the program and negatively affecting the members. Yes, her attitude is really bad. Yes, she doesn't know what she's doing. But unfortunately, it would be unprofitable to hire somebody else at the moment, because we would have to go through the hiring process and also train somebody. Whereas she's been working at this program for 14 years, almost the whole time. So even though she was only a secretary, she knows what she's doing better than anybody we could hire. So if we hired somebody else, it would be even worse, essentially. And it would also be unprofitable because we don't have the money to pay for the training. That was her conclusion from the investigation, that like, yeah, it's really bad. It's really, really bad, but there's like nothing we can do about it. Oh my God. So that really sucked. So the apartment complex started taking apartments. They started saying, after 15 years of like minimal incidents, because of a murder and because a whole bunch of other stuff happening, somebody drove a truck into one of the buildings at one point. Some of the members were getting into fights with the neighbors. And this is a normal apartment complex, by the way. I mean, you've got people that are in this mental health program right next to everybody else, right? It's not like this complex was built specifically for the program. It's just the program happened to have an office right next to it, and they were like, we can house our members in this apartment complex. And so for 15 years they've been maintaining this relationship, and then a murder happened, somebody drives a truck into a wall, members are getting into arguments with the neighbors, mental breakdowns are happening, neighbors are getting really upset, and the apartment complex starts taking the apartments back. And it was so funny to me because one day I was in the group therapies and the director comes in and she says, guys, we need to talk about your behavior because the apartment complex has just kicked out 3 members and taken that apartment back because you guys keep getting into fights with the neighbors and doing all of this stuff. 15 years we've been peacefully existing in this apartment complex, and now all of a sudden everything is, shit's hitting the fan, and I don't understand why. And the crazy thing is she was actually promoted to director like 2 months before I got there, which was about a month before the murder happened. And now I don't know what changed. I don't know what's changed. It's like, I think the thing that's changed is that you're in charge now. I think that's the thing that's changed. And the reason shit's hitting the fan now is because you're doing a terrible job. Like, maybe that's really it, Because, again, this murder was preventable. People were urging the director, we need to isolate this guy. We need to send him somewhere else because he's serious about this. And she didn't take it seriously. Or if she did, she didn't take the necessary steps. That was really it. That was really the beginning of the end for the relationship between the program and the apartment complex, which in the end affected the members because we're living there. And so them potentially taking apartments away affected me. I was like, I don't want my roommate to have a severe mental breakdown and then all of a sudden I don't have a place to live, even though I didn't do anything wrong, right? The day that I moved in, I briefly talked to my next door neighbor who was not a member of the program, and he was like, oh, you're in that program? Yeah, just keep quiet, man, because sometimes I be hearing like banging on the walls and yelling and stuff, and I don't want no trouble. And I was like, no, don't worry, I'm not that type of person. I'm not going to do that. My roommates, however, I can't say the same for them. And living with roommates, I mean, I don't want to complain too much about the other members because really the focus here is the mismanagement from the program itself. Having roommates that are mentally ill was also not very easy for me. It affected my sleep. They tended to be loud and have breakdowns and things like that. It's like I'm understanding and patient with that kind of thing because I've been there and I get it. It's not their fault. At the same time, I don't really want to live with people like that. But of course I was forced to. And of course the neighbors in this apartment complex also, I mean, it was a great apartment complex, very kind of cheap, decent apartments, and it was right next to a school, like right there next to a school and a police station. For the people that were just living in that apartment complex, it was great. It was a fantastic, like, premium location. And the only problem was that they've got these pesky mentally ill people that keep having mental breakdowns and driving their trucks into the walls and murdering people. I mean, there's issues with the way that the insurance company funds these kinds of things. There's issues with underfunding in general. Like, it's not profitable to hire somebody that actually knows what they're doing, that kind of thing. There's issues, like, systemically, but it came down, like, the worst of it came down to this director just being really shitty at her job. So what's happening here? I go to this program thinking it's going to be pretty great. I find out that I will be punished for providing peer support to people and trying to make friends and be a good person, and that my goals aren't going to be taken seriously. And the director of the program is essentially a dictator who thinks that all of the members are entitled children. The energy is pathologizing and medicalizing everything, looking at every behavior that anybody does through a lens of pathology. I go there thinking, I don't need intensive mental health care. I really am mostly just here for the housing. And so I'm sort of trying to struggle against finding a balance between self-respect and, participating in this program so I can keep the housing. All of the members and all of the staff are whispering amongst themselves about how much the director sucks, There was just a murder for the first time. Relations are tense between the members and the director, and between the program and the apartment complex. Things are going downhill. There's an investigation on the director from the corporate entity that owns the program, and they find that she is really bad at her job, but unfortunately they don't have the funds to replace her at the moment. My friend she gets kicked out of the program. So basically they kicked her out of the program because she was the one that was providing weed to other people. Now, I can't say that having weed available to the members of that program was not necessarily a bad thing. There's certainly people in that program that definitely shouldn't have been smoking a lot of weed or like at all. My friend, however, understood this, and when somebody that she was providing with weed started going a little overboard with it, she would cut them off. She would say, "You're having too much. You're starting to have delusions or whatever else. I don't think it's a good idea for you to keep smoking." So she would actually cut people off if she felt like they were abusing it, or that they didn't really need it, or if it was harming them in some way. She got kicked out of the program. She was discharged from the program, and they gave her like 2 days to get her stuff out of her apartment. And she didn't have anywhere to go. She was living in her car now, which was not as nice as my car to live in. It was a small little sports car. And about like 3/4 of her possessions, she couldn't store it in her car. She just didn't have space. So she left some of her stuff with me in my apartment, some of her stuff with her girlfriend in her girlfriend's apartment, and then some of her stuff with a friend that was about a 40-minute drive away, that wasn't able to hold on to all of her stuff and wasn't able to hold on to it for very long. So she was, struggling to figure out where to keep her stuff, because she'd gotten kicked out of this program. She wasn't living there anymore. And now the director is saying, if you are seen on the premises at all, anywhere near the apartments, we're going to call the police and we're going to get you charged with trespass. And before she was able to get all of her stuff out of there, the director sent staff members to basically search the apartments of anybody that my friend had associated with, except for me. For some reason, they never searched my apartment. But my friend hadn't put a whole lot of stuff with me. She put her most expensive stuff with her girlfriend, which included over $5,000 of computer equipment and music making equipment and legal documents like her passport, her immigration papers, her birth certificate, very important stuff, her ID, very important like legal documents, and a whole bunch of, electronics that were worth a lot of money. And with me, she left like blankets and plushies and stuff like that. For some reason, they never came to my apartment, as far as we know, but they went to other apartments and they took her stuff and they threw it out. They threw it in a dumpster right next to the office, where if my friend had been seen trying to get her stuff out of the dumpster, she would have been charged with trespassing. She never got her stuff back. And she had some difficulties later on because she was lacking her legal documents. And of course, now she's also lost over $5,000 worth of electronics that she bought with her own money. And she's living in her little tiny sports car. Despite all that, my friend did more for herself to improve her life and her quality of life outside of this program within like the 3 months after she got kicked out than she ever did within the program. She got an apartment. She got the rest of her stuff into the apartment. She got her girlfriend moved in with her. And I mean, it wasn't perfect, but they were doing better for themselves outside of this program than they did within the program. So that was kind of a big eye-opener for me, being able to witness that. I was still in the program. They were making a big deal about the weed thing. They got the central dealer kicked out, but somehow people were still smoking weed because, I mean, they're going to do that whether there's someone in the program to provide them with it or not. Now they were drug testing me. They found out I was smoking weed. And so they were like, if you don't quit smoking weed, we're going to kick you out of the program too. And I was like, okay, well, I want my housing. I'm here for the housing, and I'm going to have to quit smoking weed to keep my housing, to keep, to stay living here. So I started working on getting my car running. Compared to the program in general, being in my car didn't seem like such a bad thing as long as I could get my car running. So I quit smoking weed for a month, and I would have quit for longer, but I got my car running and I stopped caring whether they kicked me out or not. And beyond that, they also were drug testing me every week rather than every month. And so, and my levels were showing on the weekly drug tests, my levels were going down up until the third week. So I did, these are fake numbers, but just to like illustrate, my THC levels on the drug test on the first week were like 180, and then it went down to 80. And then on the third week, it jumped up to like 680. And they pulled me into a meeting, and the insurance lady was there, the director was there, a whole bunch of other staff members were there. And they were like, "So you quit smoking?" And I was like, "Yes, I did." And I'm still hanging out with my friend, by the way, who is now kicked out of the program. And so she's freely smoking weed. She's smoking it right next to me all the time. Not hotboxing her car, right? There's no way that I could be getting like a buzz or a contact high, maybe just a little bit, but certainly not enough for my drug test to be showing 680. In order for it to be like that high, I would have to have been doing like massive amounts of dabs like every day since the moment of the last drug test. It was a ridiculously large number that was like inhumanly, like I would have had to really be trying to smoke as much weed as I possibly could to get up to that number. So the insurance lady slides the drug test paper across the table, and she says, "So if you quit, why is your levels so high? Why are your levels up to 680 if you've quit smoking?" And I looked at that and I was like, I don't know. I mean, obviously that's a typo or something, right? Obviously they just accidentally put a 0 at the end when it was supposed to be like 68 or something like that, right? Like, obviously this is a mistake. And the insurance lady looks me dead in the eyes and she says, "I don't think anybody is gonna buy that. I don't think anybody here is gonna buy that." She accused me of lying. And I was like, what? So I'm kind of freaking out at this point because I quit smoking weed, and some typo in the drug tests is now indicating that I've smoked massive amounts of weed for some reason, and I'm being accused of lying. And now they're threatening again to take away my housing, to kick me out of the program before my car is up and running. But then the next week I got my car running, and the next week my drug test came back pretty much clean, to the point where it's actually impossible for me to drop from 680 to the number that it was on the fourth week. There was no apology, there was no acknowledgement of a mistake, there was no other meeting to say, sorry, we accused you of lying, sorry, there was a mistake, that must have been really stressful for you to be doing the right thing and then be told that you're still going to lose your housing anyway. That must have been really messed up and stressful for you. Nobody said anything like that. Nobody did anything like that. So I got my car running, and after that incident, I was like, fuck it. I haven't been going to the group therapies as much anyway. I still go every once in a while, but whatever. And at that point, the director was even punishing me further for not going to 100% of the group therapies. I did increase my attendance when they asked me to. I did everything they asked me to, really, but it simply just wasn't enough. And then they also accused me of lying and not doing what they were asking me to. So, right, like, I'm just not going to go to group therapies on the weekends. I'm just not going to call in at 6 p.m. because I have better things to do with my time and my life, and I respect myself too much for that. But if you want me to go to the group therapies on the weekdays and attend them until the end, I can do that. And I did that for a little while. And I wasn't smoking weed, and I was bored, and I was miserable. And I was like, I mean, this is what I have to do to keep my housing, right? So as soon as my car was running, as soon as I got my car running again, I was like, fuck it. whatever. This place sucks. This place absolutely sucks. They're not helping me. They're not helping other people. They're punishing me for doing things, and other people for doing things that we feel are the best for us. They're not taking my goals seriously. They're not actually, providing. They're telling me to get a job and get an income, but as soon as I get a job and an income, part of the system of the program is that they're going to take $600 of my money every month. So it's going to even be hard for me to save money while I'm in this program. Like, what's even the point? They're trying to pathologize me. They're trying to medicate me when I've told them that I have, over a decade of history doing and trying those things, and I did not find them effective. I've taken the things that actually help me and I've discarded the rest, and I'm telling you the things that don't help me and the things that I need that will help me, and you're not taking it seriously even though I'm here to get help. You're accusing me of lying. Like, my friends are doing better outside of the program than they are in the program. People are getting discharged left and right. There was a murder, a preventable murder. There was an investigation on the director because of said preventable murder, as well as complaints from the staff and from the members. And the investigation was like, oh, sorry, nothing we can do about it. At that point, I'm like, okay. When I got here, this program seemed like it would be pretty great, right? It seemed like, oh, intensive care. Maybe I can go to the group therapies, get a refresher, maybe learn something new. Stay in here for a year, maybe get some kind of income, disability, or a job or something. And when I got there, it just was like none of that happened. Nothing that I wanted to happen in that program actually happened. And instead, it was just a downward spiral until the end. So as soon as my car was running, I was like, you know what? I would literally be happier living in my car and being homeless than I would in this program, which is supposed to help people out of homelessness, right? Like, I just didn't see a path forward with this program anymore. And I got kicked out because I was smoking weed. And it was the day after Christmas that I got kicked out. I was there for 7 months, from April 2023 to December 2023. And since getting kicked out of that program, my car has been running. I've gained a following on Tumblr of people who enjoy my posts, enjoy my personality on the internet, and some of them are donating money to help me live and to support me. And now I've got, my basic needs pretty much taken care of. I don't really have to worry that much about money with these donations that I'm getting, which I super appreciate. Really what I need is like an unconditional, stress-free income so that I can rest and figure out what I'm going to do next, right? That's kind of what I wanted when I was in the program too. That's why I was trying to get on disability. Kind of a pipe dream at my age. I'm not disabled enough to get on disability, which is maybe a reason they weren't taking that goal very seriously and they wanted me to just get a job. For me, what I needed was to find a way to get a stress-free income so that I could rest and I could move forward from that after resting. And that's actually what's happened. Now that I'm living off of donations on the internet and I have that stress-free income, I'm moving forward. I'm fundraising for a van. As soon as I get a van, I'm going to upgrade it with a shower and a kitchen and a nice bed. It's going to be more space. It's going to be easier to take care of. And from there, I'm going to be able to sell my car and hopefully use that money to get like a laptop and a nice camera and a mic and start making videos like this, but better. Opinion pieces or video essays. I would also like to stream, do gaming, that kind of thing. I mean, I'm still living in my car, but I am actually doing better for myself and I'm much happier than I was in that program because my life is actually moving forward. While I was in that program, I was being held back. As soon as I got out of it, I mean, not as soon as, things were kind of rough for a little while. I was panhandling. But as soon as I started getting money through donations, things started looking up. Like this fundraiser that I have for a van, which is something that I've wanted to do since the first time I lived in my car. I was like, if I could do this but in a van, it would actually be ideal, right? That's actually the kind of life that I would want to live. Now, I'm actually heading for it, right? It's actually happening. This fundraiser is going well. It looks like it's going to happen. And I'm happy, right? I have this stress-free income and I have the motivation and the eagerness and the willingness to move forward in life and earn an income in a way that works for me and live in a way that works for me, which is not something that this program was ever going to be able to help me with. No matter where you go, these programs in this country, these programs are like that, and they absolutely suck. So, you see a homeless person that's struggling, and you wonder, why don't they just go to the shelter? Why don't they just, use the resources that my tax money is providing? Well, your tax money is paying for that shit. That's the kind of resources that people are dealing with in this country. The people that are in poverty, people that are homeless and disabled and mentally ill. That's the kind of resources that we have access to in the United States. That's what we're dealing with. And it's really no surprise that so many people would rather be homeless on the streets than deal with any of that stuff. So if you like this video, please consider giving it a like, or even subscribe to the channel to keep up with my story as I move out of this tiny car and into a van and move on with my life. And I will leave a link to the fundraiser in the description, or maybe in a comment. And if you've ever been to a program like this, or a rehab, or a psychiatric hospital, or anything, and you have a similar story, or even if you had a great time and you only have good things to say about it, let us know, because this is my experience, but maybe it's different in other places. I don't know. And if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and have a peaceful day.